So much of the artwork that you create in Adobe Illustrator will involve adding text. After all, what message can be conveyed without the use of text? Not saying that it can't be done, but more times than not, you'll need text to make it happen. There are a couple of ways to add text in Illustrator, so let's take a closer look at how to do this by adding text to our postcard. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here, so that I have the fonts that I want to use, is I'm going to activate some Typekit fonts. And Typekit fonts are fonts that are included with your Creative Cloud subscription. And we do this by coming up to the Type menu and choosing Add Fonts from Typekit. This is going to open up our Typekit web page. It'll open up in your default browser. And where it says Search Typekit, I'm going to go ahead and click in there and type Abril, A-B-R-I-L. And in the list of choices here, I'm going to choose Abril. And it's then going to display all the faces available within that font. So I'm going to scroll down towards the bottom, and I want to activate Abril Fat Face Regular and Italic. So I'm going to go ahead and click the Sync button, and then I'll click the Close button, and then I'm going to sync the Italic version of that face as well. And that's pretty much it. I'll go ahead and close that browser window, and now those fonts are going to be available on my system. Now, to add type in Illustrator, we can do it one of two ways. The first way I'll show you is what's called point type. And we do that by selecting the type tool, and I'm just going to click once anywhere in my document. You're going to notice that it's automatically going to put the words lorem ipsum, which is just generic text, and I'm going to go ahead and change this to when life gives you lemons. And I'll put a little ellipsis at the end there. And the behavior of point type is that when I switch to my selection tool, if I were to, say, grab the bottom handle and drag it down, it's going to stretch my type. And so for that very reason, I typically use point type when I'm doing really artistic type and I'm breaking the type into multiple different pieces. That's when point type tends to be more beneficial. Now I'm going to undo that, because if you do want to scale it proportionately, you can always hold down the Shift key and drag one of the corners, and that will in fact scale your text proportionately. I'm going to undo that again. Now if you want to create area type, which is the other type object that we can use here, you do that by grabbing the type tool, and I'll come down here to the yellow area, and I'm going to click and drag to draw an area type object. The difference here is that with area type, the text will wrap within the shape that you draw. So I'm going to type in here, and now we have the text that we want. Now, I'm going to highlight this text using my type tool, and in my Properties panel, I'm going to click on the drop-down menu for the font. And what we could do to make life a little bit easier for us is at the top here we have some filters that we can use. And I'm going to click on the TK, the Typekit filter, and right there is the Abril font that I want to use. And if you click on the triangle, I want to make sure that I use the regular font. And that looks pretty good. Now, I want to set the size to about 15 point, but you can totally do this visually if you want to. I'm going to increase my point size by just tapping the up arrow a couple of times. That looks pretty good. And then I'll come up here to this text as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to change that to Abril as well. But I'm going to change the size of this to about 21 points, I think. Now you can see here that the text it just keeps on going in one long line. But if I switch to my selection tool, one of the things I want to show you is this little adornment on the right side of the text object gives me the ability to change from point type to area type. So if I double click on that adornment, what you're going to find is that now if I grab the handle, it no longer distorts, but instead resizes, or reflows, I should say, to the given area. And I'm just going to kind of adjust that so the word lemons is on the second line. Then I'm going to go back to my type tool and I'm going to highlight lemons and I'm going to make that as big as I can, okay? And what you're going to find is that when you're dealing with area type objects, you can get what's called overset text. And if you look in the lower right corner, that plus sign is indicating overset text. It basically means there's more text than fits in the object that we have selected. So I'm going to grab this bottom handle and open it up to make room for the word lemons so that the area type object can accommodate it. I can also switch to the type tool by just double clicking here, and then it'll allow me to highlight the text as you see. So I'm going to increase that a little bit more. And I think I'm going to change this word, the word lemons, to the italic face. There we go. Now I made it a little too big, so let's make it a little smaller. That looks pretty good. Now I'll highlight this once again, and we can also change the leading. The leading is the vertical space between lines of copy. And so if I decrease that by hitting the down arrow, I can tighten up that vertical space the way that I want it to look. Finally, I'll select all of this text, and in the fill, I'm going to change the fill to white. That looks pretty good. If you want to, you can tighten up the area type object. Down here at the bottom, we can just drag this handle to move it up. What you can also do, if you double click on this adornment at the bottom, that will change this to auto expanding, meaning that the area type object will grow as needed as you add text to it. So that looks pretty good. Down here, I'm going to move this down a little bit to kind of vertically balance it within that object. And I think what I'll do is add one more area type object. I'm going to grab the type tool and I'm going to click and drag. And then inside of here, and it's important to remember that Illustrator is like an elephant. It remembers the last setting that you used. And you can see that the text that it put in here is very large because that was the last text that I formatted. What I'll do is I'll come over here to my font menu. I'm going to uncheck the Typekit filter, and I'm going to find the font Myriad. That's M-Y-R-I-A-D. And so I'm just going to scroll down. And here we have Myriad Pro, and I want the regular version. And then I'm going to make the point size about 9 point. And then I'll change the leading to say 12 point. And now for that text, I'm just going to type in here, bring this postcard to your local retailer for 20% off a new water bottle. That's just our little disclaimer down at the bottom. And now that I look at that, I think I can close up that leading, maybe make that 11 point. That looks pretty good. And we'll just tighten that up and pull this to the bottom so that it doesn't really interfere with the look and feel of this. And you can adjust this as you see fit, but now you can see that we have our text that has been added. And these guides at times can be a little distracting. And so if you don't want to see your artwork with those guides, feel free to come up here to the View menu and come down here to Guides and choose Hide Guides. The shortcut, by the way, is Command semicolon on Mac or Control semicolon on Windows. Depending on the type of text you need in your document, you'll want to take advantage of either point type or area type, or even both, to achieve the desired look of your artwork.